I usually ask people, what do you think your CEO cares about? Do they care about the fact that someone in a department learns something? Or do they care more about how quickly the organization is able to adapt to whatever the future holds for the organization? We need to work on helping people collaborate better and building trust and building relationships and network and all of that. So as an L&D, we have this amazing opportunity because we are often in the middle of things. So it can be our role to bring these departments together. We have all of this information coming to us from the external environment and then also from the organization as well. But the question is, are we taking time to reflect and properly understand what that means for us and what needs to change in order for us to grow as an organization?
This episode of L&D Disrupt is brought to you by How Now, the learning platform that actually makes learning matter. Because let's face it, you could push out loads of content, track skills in a spreadsheet, drown in admin, and still not know what's working. Or you could use How Now to connect your people to the skills they need, deliver learning in the flow of work, and prove it's making a difference. That's how modern companies like Depop, Trainline, Crunchyroll, SoEnergy, Forsaven, TomTom, Investec, and so many more do it. Learn more at gethownow.com.
Lavinia, I'm so excited for this. We had you on the show many, many years ago. We were saying the last time we caught up was a year ago at an event in Belgium.
Yeah,
in Belgium. And then we stayed till late, talking L&D over drinks. I mean, the worst combination. But good to have you on record. And so really excited for this. I wanted to dive into a bit more about this idea of kind of the learning architect. Like, I know you've been writing about this in more recent times. I mean, you spent years helping L&D leaders and talking to them, working with them, building a community around them. What was the particular insight or frustration that sparked the learning architect?
I think it was at first AI. Like, everybody was wondering, like, what's next for us if AI comes in and takes some of the work that we've been doing, which I'm very happy about, by the way. Like, let AI take all the manual work, let it, just do the boring stuff that we had to do before. But the question now is like, okay, what's next for us? And I think there is an answer around AI itself. I think there's a lot of cool technical things that we could do with AI in L&D. But then I think we do need to ask some bigger questions when it comes to organizational learning, because another thing that I'm hearing a lot from our community is that, okay, we put all these programs. It can be a training program, coaching, mentoring, whatever it is, but there's still this feeling that people are not applying what they're learning so much. So there's a lot of wasted potential there. So the question is, what's stopping people from applying what they're learning in these programs? And is there something else that needs to be shifted in organizations so that, people learn and organizations learn and so on? So I think it is a bit about the future of L&D, which tends to be really scary nowadays, and also about all of these challenges that we've had for quite a while that we can now tackle because AI is doing some of the boring stuff.
One of the things that really stood out for me is in this mental model of a learning architect, you draw this distinction between organizational learning and individual learning. So let's help me unpack that, right? What's the difference? Because I'm sure there's a lot of people who'll see that and go, isn't it the same? Isn't organizational learning just a bunch of individuals learning? What's the difference?
I think, again, going back to what I was saying before, I think people can learn, but it doesn't mean that it gets applied into organizations, and it doesn't mean it gets adopted, as a mental model, as a practice in organizations. So I think that's the main distinction. Okay, you can send people to all of these programs, but they might not, because there are some blockers in the organization itself, and we can talk about those, they might not apply those in the ecosystem that is the organization, so that the organization itself learns as well. And you can see that, in how people make decisions, in how they experiment, and how the company grows in the end, and so on. But I feel like that's the main difference. Okay, you send people to these programs, but they do not apply what they're learning, and the organization doesn't kind of adopt all of these practices in order for it to learn as well.
Just to double down on some of those telltale signs, right? Say I'm listening to this and I want to go into my organization and figure out, have we got individuals learning but not organizational learning happening? What are some of the things I'm looking out for, right, that happening that would tell me, okay, this is the problem I've got?
Yeah. One of them is sense making. Okay, so we have all of this information coming to us from, the external environment, and then also from the organization as well. But the question is, are we taking time to reflect and properly understand what that means for us and what needs to change in order for us to grow as an organization? So these small reflection practices, like at the end of a program or the end of a project in any team, do we take time to actually think of what we learned, what we need to do better next time? So that's a small thing. Then another thing, and I was just talking to some community members about this. Corporate strategies shift, and what usually happens is that at the top, people are very clear about what that corporate strategy is, and they come in and maybe talk about it once or twice. But the question is, does the organization understand what that means, for product, for tech, for marketing, and so on? So do we take the time to actually make sense of a new corporate strategy and make sure that we are aligned to it in the way that we work and in the projects that we take on? So that's one thing. Sense making. The other thing is experimentation. Like, I'm a big fan of the idea of experimentation, but what I feel happens is that only a few departments naturally adopted like this practice. Like, okay, you have product, you have marketing with A/B testing and so on. But the question is, do other departments adopt this idea of experimentation, and not in a, let's just try things out all day, but actually in a smart way? Like, do we have assumptions that we need to test? Can we plan tests for a certain period of time so that we can see if those assumptions are correct or not, and so on? So I feel like experimentation is another sign that the organization is learning. And then the last thing that comes to mind is it is about learning, and it's kind of like the collaboration makeup, the network makeup of the organizations. So do departments have spaces to talk to each other and to understand what each of them do? Do we have spaces where we can come together to work on different projects and just learn together from our failures and our successes and so on? So just to recap, I think reflection, experimentation, and collaboration are 3 signs that can tell us if the organization is learning or not.
What would you say to someone who goes, look, it's hard enough to get individuals to learn. And so I've got individuals learning. I'm happy. They're looking at courses, they're learning, they're coming back to me and saying, oh, actually, you know what, that course was pretty decent. Why do I really need to think about organizational learning? Why can't I just be happy with individuals learning?
Oh my God, I think it is a question about the future of L&D, because if you look at what's happening right now, AI, and oh my God, I think this word is used so much, but AI is becoming better at supporting individual learning. And I think that's amazing, because we do have, like, AI can offer access more than people like just the L&D team could before, right? To like coaching and mentoring and content itself, right? So the question is, okay, what will L&D do from now on? And I think it's a big one and it's a scary one, but we do need to tackle it because it is about the survival of this industry, right? So that's one thing. The other thing is I usually ask people, like, what do you think your CEO cares about? Do they care about the fact that someone in a department learns something, or do they care more about how quickly the organization is able to adapt to whatever the future holds for the organization, right? And it's like everybody says, yeah, well, they do care more about the latter. Okay, then why don't we work on that? And then the third thing is that there's a lot of, again, spilled potential. Like, okay, we invest all of these resources in terms of like budgets, but also like the L&D teams that are assigned to these projects. But they are so frustrated about the fact that they do not see impact. To give you an example, with leadership development, we just had just did a research around leadership development, and we saw two things. First, that there's a lot of investment in leadership development, and second, that L&D say that those programs are not effective. Like year over year, we're over investing, but I think the problem is that we need to invest year over year. Why isn't this problem solved, or at least partially solved, and we see these leaders struggling? So there's something about how big our impact could be and is at the moment.
So I guess, even going back to your previous point around how would I know I'm seeing a lack of sense making, poor collaboration, right? A fear to experiment. None of those things will come out from measuring activity, right? Like if the only thing I was tracking was time spent learning and completion, I'm never going to know those things, right?
Yeah.
And so that's obvious then. So the things you're telling me I need to spot, I'm never going to know. It might be there, but I'm never going to know. But this kind of focus on measuring activity is there even in the most seasoned L&D professionals, right? Why? Why do you think that's still there, right? Like what you're saying here sounds logical. I'm in, right? But why is it not happening?
I think it's the easiest thing to measure. That's one thing. Like, just those numbers are there. And truth be told, I don't think that every L&D team measures those things. Like, not even those things. But those numbers are there. The leaders, execs don't know what else to ask of L&D. So, they just go for the easiest number to track, which is completion rates and attendance rates. So I think those two are part of the problem somehow. And then we also kind of got stuck in this loop of, okay, if I reported this last year, I'm going to report it next year as well. And also measuring other things has been proven over and over again to be really hard. It's not impossible, but you do need more investment and better skills for an L&D team to measure behavior change, or even things like experimentation, adoption, and so on. So I think it's just really hard, and L&Ds are already so busy and overwhelmed with the work that they do. They just don't have the mental capacity, the mental energy to go in and actually measure other things properly. Yeah.
And so let's play out this thought exercise, right? Let's say we completely stripped back L&D, right, down to the ground, and we're going to rebuild it up today, right? What would you keep? What would you throw out? Give me one thing you would keep and one thing you'd throw out in what we're doing.
Oh, it's interesting because I've also seen some of this in practice with really brave L&D teams completely turning around the way they do things. So what I would add, not necessarily keep, is someone in behavioral science. I think that's really important for people to kind of add other tools to their toolbox of how they support behavioral science. Like, it's not just training. Let's do other things as well, So I think someone with a behavioral science background can help both with adding those tools, but also with the measurement piece as well. Then I would also add someone in experience design that can help us transform the way that we design learning, because I feel like right now it's very content-based. And I mean, you can take content from, I don't know if I can say tools, but ChatGPT, Perplexity, whatever it is, you could even go on Google, to be honest. But so you have content out there. So why would people come to a training session these days? And the answers that I hear over and over again, it's about connection, people just wanting to come together and talk about things and solve things together, and about emotion, right? Feeling something different than I feel when I just sit in front of my computer. So we do need better experienced designers to design for those things, for emotion and for connection. And then what I would drop, and this is going to be so controversial, I think I would drop instructional designers, as bad as that sounds. On one hand, I do feel like we need better people to design digital experiences, learning experiences. But on the other hand, I don't feel like ADDIE should be followed. And I think that AI will do such a good job at offering those personalized, this time, experiences, learning experiences in the online world. So I don't see why we should design another course. Honestly, I'm just over it, and I'm not the only one. Like, other people are over it as
I'm
well.
going to put this on the thumbnail. Yeah, Lavinia's like, drop instruction design. That's it. Period. No, I hear you, right? Like I hear the idea of, if we working in tech ourselves, we know we've got tech that can essentially understand your needs, create the insight content you need, deliver it right then and there, faster than any human's ever going to be able to do it, right? And similar to what you're saying, I find myself in that situation. What I'm leaning more and more towards going deeper of how do you operationalize and productize, it is the learning science of it, right? Like, quite often we don't teach people to learn, right? But we learn. Right? It's not that because we were never taught how to learn, we're not able to learn. It's such an innate part of how we navigate the world around us. And so really all we're trying to do is decode and deconstruct how we're innately doing that. So you can kind of bottle it up and put it into something that accelerates that, right? Like that's all we're trying to do. And I find this is what we probably need this time for. It's just to go, that's fine, guys. AI's bought us a bit of time. The content piece that you were doing now, it will carry on doing that for a little while, but that's not going to be enough for us to be able to do the things we need to be able to do. And it does mean we need to ask different questions. So I'm here for it. I mean, you're in a community of L&D leaders. You have a lot of conversations. You must hear things that go, oh, no, I can't believe they're doing that. Like things that go, oh man, we're still missing the point. What are those things?
Oh, so many things. I think learning styles is one that kills me every time, kills my small L&D soul when I hear about learning styles. And then, again, feedback training, that's another one. And I was just talking to someone in the community, and he was saying, I'm one of those people that still do feedback training. But I think it's about how you do it, right? Because there's one thing to teach people again and again the same models, like the sandwich model, and I don't know what else model, that people know the theory. That's not the problem. The problem is that there's something stopping them from doing it in practice. So, I'm just even thinking, can these feedback training programs become a sandbox for something else? So instead of content, let's just discuss the problems we're having. Let's do a bit of team coaching, if a team has issues with feedback, let's bring them together and let's open up the conversation. What's stopping you? Because it's not about the fact that people don't know, that they need to share a good feedback first and the bad feedback second, and so on. It is about trust. It is about, other things that can actually be tackled with this learning architecture model that we're trying to figure out, right? So that's definitely another one. I don't think that I think I'm lucky enough to be surrounded by people in my community that are actually very brave and are trying to do things differently. So I will leave it to those two, but definitely in the broader community, there are still things like measuring MPS and measuring attendance rates. Those are also things that I don't subscribe to. But yeah, it is what it is. I think it's a progression. I think we need to experiment more in the L&D community. I think we do need more courage to just, strip of ourselves of all the things that or most of the things that we've been used to, and just do things differently. I think.
Two things come to my mind on the back of that. This on learning styles, right? Like, I'm amazed by how effective the idea of learning styles has been in distributing that idea, right? Like, there aren't many ideas that are related to learning and education that I think has diffused into the mainstream, as well as, like, you can speak to an average Joe, and they will tell you I'm a visual learner, right? And I can't quite understand. I was reflecting on this because I hear it so often, right? Like, I hear it in so many different ways. I hear it sometimes when I'm interviewing people, and like, sometimes I just don't have the heart. I was like, it's not the time for this conversation. I can't do this. But it does. I was reflecting on this, going, did they teach this at school? Like, where did we get this from? Like, do you know? Like, why has it been so effective that everyone seems to have this idea? That where do you think it comes from?
I think it's, in my honest opinion, it's very easy. Simple ideas stick. If you think about start with why, for example, it's such a simple idea. Everybody knows about it. It's the same with learning styles. First of all, it's simple. Second of all, it's something that helps people understand a very complex thing about themselves. If you think about it, the way that we learn, it's so freaking complex. The way that our brain functions is so hard to understand. So when you just put a label on it, I'm a visual learner, it's just so easy to understand. But at the same time, like a few years back, I was reading some research on how detrimental learning styles are to our the way that we learn. So it's not just that, hey, they're not effective, but they're actually detrimental because it keeps us in a box and it doesn't allow us to experiment. And if we are to learn hard things, we do need to push ourselves outside of our comfort zone. So, not just watch a TED Talk because that's how we learn, actually go out there and practice and experiment and so on. So, but to go back to your question, I think it is about simplicity, the simplicity of the framework, let's call it, but it's also about the fact that we need easy ways to understand a very complex.
Yeah, it's so true. It's such a good point because it's also in some ways I can understand the limiting factor because it's like a fixed mindset thing, right? Because I've also heard it used in the context of I didn't do this well because I'm a visual learner and all of that was something else, right? Like it almost becomes a crutch for you to lean on that this is the limitation, I can't do it this way. Yeah. The other thing, the jump off point was for, a lot of things that you said, like whether it's MPS and a bunch of other things there, right? Like it comes down to certain ways companies have been used to running, like whether it's KPIs, OKRs, and even like job titles and like things that are established ways companies run. Do you think some of these concepts is the reason why we struggle as well? Because we can't. People are struggling to experiment and do the things that they need to do because we're limited by hitting these KPIs within this time frame. Do you think that's a limitation?
Yeah, I do think so. I think you mentioned jobs as a concept. I think that's very limiting. And I mean, it's not like I came up with this, but if you go back to the 90s and to what Peter Senge was saying, he was saying that, there's an identity that you have around the job that you're doing. So you're stuck with that. And it's hard for us to see beyond the KPIs that we have and the tasks that we have. And if you think about it, in the complex world that we live in, we sometimes need to go beyond our jobs, right? There's no like pure job that does just only that one thing anymore. We do need to learn from how others are doing things. I think it hurts collaboration as well. So yeah, I totally think that's the case. But on the other hand, going back to this idea of people need simple ways to cope with things in a very complex world, I think it would be, and it will be really hard for us to like strip ourselves down of all these things. If you look at, the organizations that corporate rebels work with, where there are no roles, there are no managers, there are no, like, people still look at that like, that's nuts, that's insane. And we also need a certain upbringing, I think, and a certain educational system for people to be open to that and to be effective in a world where there are less constraints. And I don't think we have that at the moment. So yeah, I think it is limiting, but it's also somehow a good way to cope with things.
Yeah, I think I also see the problem being that can exist and you can keep it, but that being the only thing you pin so much on, what someone's responsibility is, what's the area of kind of KPIs and like that one thing drives all of those things. It is so much dependent on this quite an abstract or arbitrary thing, right? Because that particular job role could mean something completely different in another company, which is often the case, right? Like when I've used this example with like product designers internally, like what a product designer means in one company is completely different to what a product designer means in another company. And I think the lack of, in most companies, having another metric to lean on or another, I guess it's a form of identity, right? To kind of lean on, to go, oh, this person's also this. And this is where I do think skills as a way of classifying helps, right? Because it broadens the way I can see this person now, right? Like this is a product designer who knows how to use Figma, but this is a product designer who knows how to use Figma and some other tool here and do something else, right? You're not going to get that from the job title, but you could get that from the skills they're looking at.
Yeah.
And I think that's where I sometimes see the pushback of people going, oh, we can't get rid of job titles. I get it, right? Like you've so conditioned.
Yeah.
It's a tough one, but you need to at least, if you're not going to get rid of it, at least look at what else can give you that context, which kind of brings me to, people who are listening to this right now go, all right, tell me what I need to do, right? I get it. I get that I need to architect something which is not content, which is where I love the fact that you talk about this idea of kind of the learning environment, right? So talk to me about what's the learning environment, right? What does it include?
I'm going to go back. Like the first thing that came to my mind is collaboration. Like if we want people to learn together and for the knowledge to flow very well, of course we have AI now, which is amazing in my opinion. Like it can solve so many knowledge management issues that we've had before. But it's not just that. We need to work on helping people collaborate better and building trust and building relationships and network and all of that. So I think as an L&D, we have this amazing opportunity because we are often in the middle of things. We talk to so many departments. So it can be our role to bring these departments together. So that's definitely one thing. Then the other thing would be to look at processes that help people learn that go beyond training, right? So I have to go back to the idea of reflection. What if we were to talk to leaders and to teams about how important reflection and sense making is and supporting them in creating these little rituals where they come together at the end of a project, at the beginning of the project, at the end of the year, the beginning of the year, whatever it is, so that they can just stop for a second and make sense of the things that they work on, right? So that's another thing. Then to go back to the point that you were making about skills, I think that's so powerful. And I think so few companies are actually nailing this just because it is hard. Like we need to acknowledge it's not something easy to do. But I feel like there are two types of companies. I see companies where the L&D team just took it upon themselves to do like competency models, skills models, and so on. But they kind of work in a silo, and I don't think that works very well. I think that we need to partner with our different departments and figure out together what those models are. And then, I see companies where it just feels like things are changing so quickly. And that's also a thing that I would often like to kind of challenge. Are things changing as quickly as we say? Because apart from AI coming in, and there's definitely a broad set of skills that came together with AI, what else has changed, right? And of course, AI made redundant some skills, but you were saying Figma. So working with different tools, that's kind of the same. Those soft skills that I hate calling them soft skills, but critical thinking, creative thinking, problem solving, these have been around for years and they will stay for years even with AI, right? So these competencies, skills, however each company calls them, there are some fundamentals that stay the same. What if we would start by focusing on those first and making sure that we understand them and that we understand how, if our organization and our individuals have them or not, right? So I would even go there in terms of like what else to architect. And then something else that I'm hearing more and more, and I find it really interesting, is this idea of the L&D team kind of bridging the gap between the company strategy and what people are working on. And I was saying this earlier, usually execs have a very clear idea on where the company needs to go and what projects it needs to take on, but there's the communication gap. It's not enough to say it once or twice. You do need to spend time with people to make sure that they understand it and that they are taking on, like making it themselves, the strategy that the company has, right? So I think L&D can do that. They can just insert themselves into, okay, how do we kind of deploy the strategy in every department and team in our organization? And I see companies and L&D teams doing that, and they're so brave, honestly. And it is a lot about facilitation, a skill that we already have. Why don't we put it to work? Why do we still need to bring in consultants to do work that we could do in L&D? We just need more courage and we need to step up. And I completely forgot the question that you asked, but
it's all right, but the answer is still good. I mean, it reminds me of there's like a business wisdom of, when so much is changing, sometimes you've got to invest in what's constant, right? And a lot of what we're talking about, experimentation, etc., is these are those persistent things that need to be there, which, whether it's AI or quantum computing, whatever the next fundamental shift that we see, you'll be ready for it if you've got these fundamental things in place. I do want to double down on the kind of examples, right? Like, because quite often that is the thing, right? It is, I feel like from the conversations I have, a lot of people kind of know what the right thing to do is. It's just the between knowing and doing, right? And so for the companies and L&D teams that you do come across who are like venturing on this, not to say they've got it all figured out, but they're at least starting to show that this is the right direction. Can you give examples of like approaches of what's worked, what's not worked, or patterns that you're seeing?
Oh my God. I just want to stop here for a second because I want to make a call out in the community that we need to bring more examples to the table. Like, this is something that we're trying to do as a community. We talk so much theory, and what we're hearing from the community is that they do need examples. I know that there are, processes that need to be like checked with organizations, but let's just talk about what the real work is. And also let's just talk honestly about what the real work is, because I feel like we hear all of these stories where everything goes amazing and so on. And everybody knows that's not the case, right? So even with our community, we're trying to create this safe space where people can come in and talk about what's not working, as well as, the successes they've had. One of the things, and now back to your question, one of the things that I've seen not working is trying to make a shift overnight. Like just saying, okay, we're going to completely rethink the way that we do L&D. That never worked in all the companies that I've come across and all the L&D teams that I've come across. I think the shift, as painful as it is in a world that changes very quickly, is slow. And you do need to stop and think about what we need to keep, what we're going to try and change, what we're going to strip away completely. So I'm not going to name names, but I know a team that works in the e-commerce industry, and they've been at this like change process for years now, and it took them so long to even gain the trust of the broader, stakeholder community they have to even hire a behavioral scientist. It took them 4 years to do so, right? So you need to come in and be ready, like as a mindset that it's gonna take a long time. That's one thing. The other thing that I see it's working really well, although it's really hard, is to let go of control and let go of all the things that we knew that we knew, not necessarily that it was working, but it's just that we've been used to those things. And I was telling you even before the recording of the episode that I was just talking to a community member, and they had to adopt AI in their company really quickly. And what happened to her was that all the other departments were kind of picking up and starting to design their own programs, and people were just sending calendar invites, and she was not used to that way of operating. She was used to doing her needs assessment and designing, for weeks a certain program and getting all these approvals, designing fancy slides, and she just had to let go of all of that and just go and ask her stakeholders, how can I be of help? Who do you need to be connected with? How can, how can I connect people? How can I support what's already working in this process, and kind of not just support, but make sure that I enable this happens throughout the company, right? So she just had to let go of all of her usual ways of working and make sure that she comes in with a different mindset and a different role. That's something else that I'm hearing as well. And I think, again, being patient, but also being open to changing your identity, because you mentioned identity, right? I think in L&D we do have this identity of we're creators of training, creators of e-learning. We just need to take that away and make sure we embrace other identities as well.
I've got a few more minutes with you. So I do want to come back on, lean into your experience around building, which I think is one of the most important L&D communities.
Mm-hmm.
What have you learned, I guess, around how groups of people come together and learn together, right? Because this is kind of, in ways, there's a lot we can learn from your community building experience around how organizations should learn, right? Because it's a group of people coming together and it's not just about individuals learning. Are there takeaways from that?
For sure. And I think I see a lot of talk about communities of practice in organizations, and I feel like one thing that we need to be clear of is the idea of belonging. Like, you need to, and it's not just the branding of things. It's not just that we need to call it in a certain way, but you need to make sure that people have a sense of, I'm part of something that's not a one-time thing. It's something that's continuous. So maybe that's one takeaway. The other takeaway is that if, as an L&D team, if you want to do this, you need to let go of control. Things will happen that you're not aware that those things are happening. You're not the ones the one controlling those things. And if it's good for people, if people are learning, just let them do whatever the sessions they do, whatever groups they create. Just let them work through their own stuff. But at the same time, I think you as an L&D team or as an L&D individual, you need to be able to spend a lot of time listening to what people are saying. And I think that's one thing that we're trying to do a lot in our community of L&Ds. Just what topics are people bringing up? What formats seem to be the most effective for people? And maybe let go a bit of the needs analysis process that we've been used to, where you go in and you talk to everyone and you make a list and just be there with people, and just listen to what they're saying and trying to amplify and create spaces where they can talk about AI, which, it's a big topic. We just created small groups of people to do that. We just created small groups of people to talk about measurement, about budgeting, because we're recording this in October and everybody is like way into the budgeting process. Like whenever someone calls something in our community and we kind of see that people are gathering around that topic, we make sure that we create spaces for them. And the final thing that I would add here is learning is about, and organizational learning, I think, is about rewarding the behaviors that you want to see more of in your organization. So spotting the people that are doing more and that are, and you also need to be very clear on what those behaviors are. But then again, spotting those people, calling them out, making sure that you reward them in a formal or informal way, I would say. It's also extremely important for those behaviors to kind of, scale within the organization.
Lavinia, so much to take away. Thank you for coming on the show. Always a pleasure. Look
Thank
forward
you
to the next
so
time.
much for having me.
This is how we learn now.
This episode of L&D Disrupt is brought to you by How Now, the learning platform that actually makes learning matter. Because let's face it, you could push out loads of content, track skills in a spreadsheet, drown in admin, and still not know what's working. Or you could use How Now to connect your people to the skills they need. Deliver learning in the flow of work and prove it's making a difference. That's how modern companies like Depop, Trainline, Crunchyroll, So Energy, Forsaven, TomTom, Investec, and so many more do it. Learn more at gethownow.com.